Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be starting right now. Welcome, everyone, to our Collective Impact Network Forum, building a collaborative initiative for small Black-led and racialized organizations. My name is Adil Mareb, and please note that this session is being recorded. Before we begin, I will walk us through some logistical instructions that will make our individual and collective participation safer and more comfortable. OCASI is committed to supporting full participation and engagement by all attendees at our events, including people with disabilities. This network forum is conducted in English, French simultaneous interpretation, American Sign Language, ASL, and Quebec Sign Language, and English captioning are available. Now, if you wish to enable the French simultaneous interpretation, in your meeting control toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen, click on the interpretation icon and then click on the French channel. If you wish to enable the ASL or the LSQ, also at the same icon, the interpretation icon, you can click and under Watch, click on ASL or FSL for LSQ. If you wish to enable the closed captioning in your meeting control toolbar, click the Show Caption icon CC. For some, you may see it under More. Zoom fatigue is real, so do what you need to do to take care of you first. Stay present and be attentive to your body and your emotions. Please keep yourself muted throughout the session. Please use the question and answer feature to post your questions to the panelists or our keynote speaker, and please do not post them in the chat box as they may get missed. You will find the question and answer feature in the dashboard also at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Also, if you have any technical questions, please use the chat feature to communicate directly with the username @OCASI chatbox support or chatbox support. And finally, please fill out the evaluation form that will be shared at the end of the session to help us improve our future workshops. And finally, this is a safe space to share with everyone your thoughts and feedback. Please be considerate and respectful when speaking and interacting via chat and while posting questions. Now, I would like to introduce Debbie Douglas, the Executive Director of the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, OCASI.
Thank you, Adal. Good morning, everyone. Debbie Douglas, as you heard, I'm the Executive Director of the Council. It is my great pleasure to be joining you this morning from Toronto, Treaty 13 territory. The treaty is with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Toronto is the traditional home of many First Nations, including the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat Huron peoples. And more recently is home to many Inuit and Métis peoples. One of the gifts, and I love to talk about this in this June, as we head into June, the National Indigenous History Month. One of the gifts, many gifts we have received from First Nations is the concept of the dish with one spoon. And the concept comes from the dish with one spoon wampum belt covenant, which is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Ojibwe confederacies. And the idea is that we are rich with resources, and we can all take what it is that we need and leave enough so that all can share in the wealth that we have been blessed with, especially during this time of economic hardship for so many, including First Peoples. I want us to keep that concept in our minds as we talk through the many issues today. So, bienvenue, tout le monde. It is a real pleasure to have you all here from across the province at the Collective Impact Building a Collaborative Initiative for Small Black-led and Racialized Organizations Network Forum. We have an exciting day ahead of us. We look forward to good discussions, to exploring new ideas, and to making new colleagues and friends. I would like you to take the time to introduce yourself in the chat box. Let people know what your name is, which organization or group you're here representing, and which part of the province or country you're joining us from. We have a robust sector, and it is always good for us to remind ourselves of that. We want you to get comfortable, and we absolutely want you to get engaged. At OCASI, we think we like to talk about brave spaces. So please feel free to share your thoughts, as we all know that we do so respectfully. We don't necessarily need to agree with each other, but we bring great respect to our conversations with each other. This is your space, so please make it yours. One of the things we're very proud of as OCASI is our advocacy work, our advocacy on public policy, but also our advocacy with funders, be they from government or the philanthropic sector, to support new ideas like this Small Black-led and Racialized Organizations initiative. The capacity building and training for Small Black-led and Racialized Organizations project is one of the means of advocacy that we've taken the lead on. The project promotes equity for small and emerging Black-led, or 3Bs as we now say, and racialized organizations. And we believe this is achieved by building the capacity of these organizations and emerging groups to successfully navigate government funding processes, effectively propose projects, negotiate contracts and contribution agreements, and secure, manage, and report on IRCC specifically in this case, but other grants and financial contributions from federal, provincial, private sector funders and organizations. I want to acknowledge everyone who has been part of this initiative, starting with you, the small Black and racialized organizations who have joined us on this journey over this past year. And I want to thank you for your trust in us, for your participation in the initiative workshop series. I attended some of them. They have been dynamic. The conversations have been rich. The follow-up has helped to inform OCASI in our own work and in our ongoing advocacy with you and on your behalf. I would like to thank our advisory committee, who generously shared their time, gave great input and guidance in developing and inspiring and engaging with the project. I would like to acknowledge and thank our workshop trainers, mentors, and many more who worked hard to make this capacity building initiative successful. And I also want to acknowledge our funders of this project and to extend a warm welcome to them this morning. I know many of them are joining us for today. Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, our main funder. We are so pleased to see you putting your money where your mouth is. You are continuing to demonstrate your commitment to equity, including the creation of a new equity fund, which you launched during the call for proposal that just recently passed. The United Way of Greater Toronto, your commitment to leveraging your funds, to working in partnership with other funders to enhance funding envelopes, to ensure broad access for as many communities as possible. We thank you for always, always walking your talk and walking side by side and in solidarity with community organizations and groups, like many of the groups here today, those who participated in this initiative, and organizations like OCASI, who look to you to support us in exploring new ideas, supporting emerging communities, especially communities that are racialized, that are Indigenous, and that are Black. We also want to acknowledge how important it is for funders to recognize the need to support projects such as this one. So our provincial friends, if you're on the call, please take a look at the whole concept of the equity fund. And maybe there is something there that we can do through our newcomer settlement program as well. And so for the first time, we open this virtual forum to all who are interested, to all Black-led and racialized organizations beyond OCASI member agencies and beyond agencies funded to provide immigrant and refugee and settlement services. Because we know, and I believe in the last 18 months or so, the arrival of a significant number of refugee claimants, asylum seekers, we use the language interchangeably, especially from Africa, have demonstrated how community themselves, and in this case, how the Black community across Ontario have stepped up to fill the gaps left by government inaction. We thank you and we welcome you to this space. And so we are delighted to have participants attending their first OCASI event. If you are the first, and if we were in person, I would make you stand up. But in this case, put it in the chat. Say, my first OCASI event. And we want to extend a really warm welcome to you as well. And now it is my great pleasure, and I'm assuming that our keynote speaker is already here. Adel, I'm looking at you.
Yes, I believe so.
Hi, yes, I am here. Sorry, Debbie.
No.
I know it's Hollywood. It's a bit Hollywood Squares for sure.
Welcome, Patty. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Patricia Wilson, Director General for Settlement Network at Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, IRCC. We lovingly call Patricia Patty.
Yes.
Patty came to IRCC with great vision from ESDC and a commitment to making equity a living, real thing within the department. Not only under her watch have they supported this initiative, but as I mentioned earlier, is moving forward with an intentional equity fund to ensure that small and emerging groups from racialized communities, from Black communities, from Indigenous communities are well represented and are supported in providing support and services to newcomers to Canada. Patty, we look so much forward to hearing from you, and thank you for joining us this morning. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Debbie. I'm very happy to be here. And, you know, I guess first of all, to say while we're meeting on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous people of all lands that we are on today. And I'm joining you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And I'm happy to say that, you know, I'm thankful that I'm able to live, work, and play on this land. And so I just want to take a moment for that. As mentioned, I'm Patricia Wilson, so Patty, Director General for Settlement Network at IRCC. And in that role, I'm responsible for settlement, the delivery of settlement and resettlement funding, including the management of the grants and contributions. So I'd like to begin by thanking OCASI for the invitation to join today as a representative of IRC Settlement, Integration and Francophone Affairs sector. Je suis très heureuse d'être avec vous pour discuter de l'important travail effectué pour renforcer la capacité des petits organismes racisés et dirigés par des Noirs. I'm pleased to share a brief summary of our departmental commitments, funding initiatives, and sector engagement tables that have been established to support the work that has been done in this space. So Debbie's mentioned settlement, integration, and Francophones affairs sector, including and the department, I would say, is very much dedicated to fostering anti-racism skills and teamwork throughout the sector to boost the impact of policies, programming, service delivery, people and culture, and stakeholder engagement. Our anti-racism work is in direct response to the call to action by the Clerk of the Privy Council for public service leaders to take action on anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal public service. We must take action in ways we know will be meaningful in addressing all barriers and disadvantages. A key message from the clerk's call is for each of us to make a personal commitment to learn about racism, reconciliation, accessibility, equity, and inclusion, and foster a safe, positive environment where these conversations are encouraged throughout our workplaces. As we all know, conversations about racism and anti-racism are never easy, but it's important to start from somewhere and make a personal commitment to listen, be willing to make mistakes, be open to receiving feedback, and to help each other to learn over time on multiple occasions. The clerk's call to action on anti-racism, equity, and inclusion in the federal public service state clearly that the time to have these conversations is now. And as such, we've at IRCC, we've launched an internal knowledge series with a goal of normalizing conversations related to anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion, and to promote anti-racist practices within the context of settlement and integration of newcomers to Canada. In line with these commitments, the department is advancing equity priorities across its programs and activities, including the 2024 call for proposals, which is our primary national intake process to ensure that diverse populations can benefit from inclusive settlement and resettlement programming. Our department continues to ensure that an equity lens is applied to ensure that services approved for funding are reflective and responsive to the intersectional needs of the diverse and marginalized newcomers accessing them to help improve their settlement outcomes. And this includes supporting diverse funding partners that reflect their communities and have had lived experience and expertise that can help inform responsive and equitable services.
Patricia,
yes.
if I could just interrupt you, could you slow down a little bit for the ASL interpreters, please?
Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much.
And this also includes incorporating truth and reconciliation through programming that increases awareness of Indigenous related topics among newcomers, as well as facilitates meaningful connections and social cohesion between Indigenous people, newcomers, and Canadians. In addition to being assessed on core project score, the call for proposal 2024 projects were also being assessed on equity, diversity, and inclusion in project design. This was new for CFP 2024, and all proposals were assessed to the degree they incorporated GBA Plus in the design, implementation, and evaluation of proposed projects, targeted programming for equity deserving clients, and truth and reconciliation in project design and delivery. As part of CFP 2024, and Debbie just mentioned this, we incorporated an equity stream into our settlement programming. The objective of the equity stream is to increase the participation of diverse grassroots organizations in the settlement sector as IRC-funded service provider organizations. So why is this stream unique? Just to give you a bit of a flavor of it, the department will be providing funding to high capacity settlement organizations with demonstrated expertise in the settlement sector to act as intermediaries to facilitate capacity building of these grassroots organizations. While the intermediary model is relatively new to IRC programming, in that equity deserving grassroots organizations will receive support to independently access departmental funding and effectively deliver settlement services to diverse newcomers. But I would say that as I worked for many years at Employment Social Development Canada, and this is a model that has been used by them and other departments, and it has been effective. So super happy that we've been able to introduce it here. So with that in mind, successful recipients will primarily focus on the following themes: building capacity of grassroots organizations that serve and are led by equity deserving populations to enhance these organizations' participation in the settlement and integration of diverse newcomers. And contributing to increased diversity of settlement organizations in the settlement sector by providing capacity building supports to grassroots organizations that are representative of their communities so that they can independently access IRC funding at a later date. Intermediaries will be expected to engage and target equity deserving grassroots organizations, implement transparent funding processes to redistribute funding to successful organizations, monitor and report on the use of the funding, and evaluate and report on results and outcomes. Funding will be redistributed to grassroots organizations that are not currently funded by IRCC. They represent equity deserving persons at multiple levels and or are mandated to serve equity deserving persons, including migrant women, youth, 2S LGBTQI plus populations, racialized newcomers, seniors, and persons with disabilities. This is a starting point, and I'm happy, I'm very happy with what we've achieved since I've arrived, but this is a starting point, and it is our hope that the department will, we will be continually looking to innovate and improve on the ways in which we empower the communities we are engaging with through this funding initiative. And then just to say for a moment on the collaborative table on anti-racism and settlement, just about our governance structure that we've introduced. A key component of our work at IRCC is our partnerships and engagements with stakeholders such as OCASI. And just to talk a bit about the collaborative table on anti-racism, it is a committee with membership from CIFA and settlement service provider organizations with the goal of engaging the settlement and integration sector service provider organizations to exchange knowledge, learn from each other, and to collaborate on initiatives. And, I would like to personally thank all the members for their involvement and their efforts to advance this important work. And in particular, the CTAR co-chair, which is Debbie Douglas. Without her initiative and efforts, I don't think I know for sure we wouldn't have made, we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we have to date. And work there has been a bit, admittedly, with the work on the CFP and with movement of folks, there has been a bit of a gap in terms of the work on CTAR, but we are working to revitalize the group through the new governance structure that we put in place. And with that in mind, the department is committed to collaborate with the sector through our regular governance sector governance committees. And so I'm co-chair of the Settlement and Integration Service Delivery Committee. And this is a bit of a new committee where we have representatives across the country, and they are service providing organizations within Ontario. It's the Dixie Bloor, one of the representatives. I don't have the list in front of me, but Dixie Bloor Neighborhood Services is one of our representatives there from Ontario. But through that, and then we work in collaboration with the policy committee. We'll be looking to use this forum as well as the policy committee to facilitate sector feedback as we implement the new equity stream initiative, which will in turn shape and inform how we innovate and improve initiatives to equity deserving groups. The equity stream is brand new for all of us, and we'll be eager to host conversations to improve and adjust our course as necessary to better serve our clients and support racialized organizations. And finally, we at our IRCC strive to regularly refine how we manage our contribution agreements and the practices and maintain ongoing dialogue with the sector. Updates are made on a continual basis, but particularly during a call for proposal period. The department really does take a holistic view of CA management, and that includes with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're, through this CFP, we are looking to ensure our agreements have the measures and levers in place to put that into practice. And we will be providing additional details through a future service delivery committee meeting, and then we'll be sharing those more broadly across the sector and obviously organizations that will be funded by RCC. Once decisions are made, we'll be seeing these new clauses. So in closing, I would just like to commend OCASI for the facilitation of this community event. It is a pleasure to work alongside with the sector in pursuit of this important work with the overall goal of creating equitable outcomes for the individuals that we serve. With that in mind, un gros merci, and I'd like to I'll turn it back to you, Debbie.
Thank you. My name is Etta. Actually, Debbie has to step away. Thank you very much for your time and for all this information that you have provided for us. You have agreed to take some questions. Yep. So I would like to ask the forum participants to put your questions not in the chat box, but in the question and answer features under your Zoom. You can find the Q&A. Just go there and put your question, because there are a lot of chat. So it is, we don't want to miss the important questions. So please go ahead and ask your question. Adele will be monitoring the question and answer, but
I'll keep an eye on the chat as well as question and answer, and I will provide support in monitoring those.
Okay, so there is the first question. Will the equity stream be modeled similarly to the SBCCI fund?
Which fund did they refer to?
The SBCCI fund.
Is that the Supporting Black Canadians?
Yes.
fund that was being delivered by ESDC. Unfortunately, I left just as that was kind of all coming together. That's when I moved from ESDC, so I'm not super familiar with it. But what I can tell you about I can tell you a little bit about the equity stream. So what we're looking at, we are looking to fund up to
Our apologies, we're having a bit of technical issues. I believe we'll be able to reconnect shortly. In the meantime, please do provide your questions in the question and answers. We got disconnected.
Oh,
there. Do you guys still hear me?
Yes.
My whole screen went black, so that was a little bit disturbing. I don't know, I lost everybody. But anyways, just to say with that, so the idea would be that there will be an organization and then they would be doing their own method for call for proposals, for lack of a better term, in terms of, and then distributing the funding in those smaller amounts to organizations. As I had mentioned. So I'm not sure. I think if I remember the Supporting Black Canadians, I think it was a little bit like that, if I remember, and maybe if I'm because there was a couple of streams, but I think there was an organization maybe out of Alberta that was chosen and might be something similar to that.
okay, thank you. The next question. We are noticing a move towards system change. What can we collectively do to speed that process? Maybe the question towards system change, if you want to clarify the person who asked the question, or if it is okay.
I guess I'm not sure if you're talking the broader immigration system or and which I'm afraid I can't really speak to. I think I can speak to what we're doing with the settlement sector in terms of the funding and just in terms of this past intake process where we have looked at how the integration of programming both in terms of and diversity, equity, and inclusion within that, and also in terms of Indigenous programming, and as well, if you recall, in the integration of GBA Plus, and as well, we are looking at baseline data in terms of looking at the organizations themselves, and how representative they are of the participants that they're looking to serve, as a bit of a baseline data to get better sense. But I think if you're referring to the broader immigration system, unfortunately, I really can't speak to them.
Thank you. The next question from the youth village that serves Black and 2S LGBTQ youth. We submitted a proposal for the first time. We did not use the equity stream. What would be our chance of success?
Well, I think what I can't tell you what your chance of success is, but I can tell you a little bit about the process and to let you know. So first of all, the assessment, we assess all proposals based against the funding guidelines that was launched in, that was the document that was, and the intake process that was launched in November. And then, obviously, I recognize that it was a comprehensive document, and that those proposals take time to submit. But I think what you need to know is that we do take very seriously the decisions in terms of the funding. And, you know, good or bad, we have a set amount of funding. It is finite. So we do look at the proposals in terms of how they rate against the funding guidelines. We look at them in terms of value for money. We also look at them in terms of the who they're looking to serve, and how does that, like, in terms of making sure we have a equitable distribution across both in the region and reaching the priorities, like in terms of target groups, and the different pieces like that. And we're in the process of doing that review so that we can have funding decisions. You know, we're looking to communicate funding decisions this fall and have agreements in place for April 1st. So with that in mind, you know, I guess what I can say is we have through the time frame, you know, the call, and we have provided sufficient time, or I shouldn't say sufficient, but significant time in terms of reviewing and assessing, and also doing that comparative review to ensure that we have a good coverage across the country, both geographically, but in terms of the groups we're serving. And, you know, when you talk about some of those, I mean, in terms of those more vulnerable groups, such as LGBTQ2 youth.
Thank you. The next question, I think they lost communication and they didn't hear when you mentioned about the funding, and they want to know, you know, how much the funding would be. Can you provide a dollar value, they say?
Was that for the equity stream that we were talking about?
It must be.
Okay, so I had said that we were looking, you know, we're looking to fund an organization in each of the IRCC regions, and we're looking up to a maximum of 5 years for the agreements. And it would be up to $5 million per organization per fiscal year, but I say up to because that depends on the proposal and the eligible expenses. And then that money would obviously be then redistributed out to smaller organizations through a competitive, or some sort of competitive process that the organization would host.
Thank you. The next question: all of our work supports newcomer and refugees, but we lack funding for settlement. How can we secure funding? Michael Elias from Eritrean Canadian Community Center.
So, sorry, you're saying you're looking to secure funding for, I didn't hear the first part in terms of, sorry. But...
Oh yeah, they say we support newcomers and refugees, but we lack funding for settlement.
Okay. And maybe you're talking, you know, so we have the program settlement funding, and we have resettlement funding. So that was the call, like, so that was, and in terms of the clients that are being served through that funding, it is with respect to those, and I don't have the line in front of me, but it, you know, it is those folks that are permanent residents, protected persons, and refugees. You may be talking, and I can't really get into like the, so that is the call, like that is the national call. There will be, which is our major intake process. That is to say that it's not the only call for proposal that we will be having as we get through this and we look at, you know, should there be other pressures or gaps, and also available funding in, you know, and I guess like I probably don't want to, like, I'm not the person to speak to about asylum claimants, but maybe that's where they're speaking about in terms of, I know the pressures that Ontario is seeing on that. But unfortunately, I'm not able to really speak to that part.
Thank you. I think our 10 minutes is up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a nice day.
All right. And I wish you all the very best today. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Bye.
So next, it is me. For some of you who don't know me, my name is Etta Waldaab. I am the Associate Executive Director here at OCASI. It is full-time. So it is wonderful to see all of you in this network forum. We have been on this journey with most of you for the past 8-9 months, starting from the need assessment. For those of you who are new to the Small Black-led and Racialized Organization Capacity Building Project, welcome. We have received feedback from workshop series participant that has this initiative is a good way to connect with peers. We want to know if that holds true. We also want to hear from our new participant joining us for this first time. So we have 2 poll questions. Adel will launch the first poll question. Yeah. Do you want to continue through a network that is collaborative initiative of small Black-led and racialized organization? And I'm not going to read the French. Yes or no?
We'll give a minute or 2 to provide enough time for everyone to provide their answer. In the meantime, just a gentle reminder, if you wish to change to the French channel or you use the ASL or the caption and you require the steps to do so, please let us know in the chat and we will share those steps again with you.
Yeah. So use the poll to answer your questions, not on the chat. And then Adel will share the result of the poll.
We're just going to give 1 more minute. We're more than halfway there. Okay, we'll be ending the poll now. Okay, as we see, we have 98% says yes and 2% says no.
Well, that is great. So what we have heard is true. People are interested in creating a network. So we go to the second question. The second question gathers your recommendation on the potential roles and function of this network. So the question, you have more minutes for this?
Yes, the second question is, name 2 things that this network can do. If possible, provide us with a couple of what are potential objectives and goals for this network, if it comes to be. We'll be providing 3 minutes to provide answers, as it is an open-end question.
So if we are establishing a network, what would be the function of this network, or what would be the purpose, and how should it be organized or governed? If you have any ideas, please let us know. You are muted. You talking?
Thank you, Eda. You know, this is actually the 16th session we do as part of this project, and I still sometimes forget to unmute myself. It's always a learning curve for everyone. I was saying that we still have 2 more minutes and then we'll be closing the poll. But I also wanted to provide another option. If you prefer to take your time in writing a response, please feel free to send it to us in an email after this network if you prefer. But I'm also happy that we're noticing we have so far 23 answers. So that's great. One more minute and then we will close. Also note, because this is an open-ended question, we will not be sharing the responses right now. We'll be sharing them toward the end of the event, at the end, the highlight points. Okay, I will be ending the poll.
Okay, thank you for your participation. So far, how is it? How is the network forum? Are you enjoying it? Just clap your hands, thumbs up. Anyway, now we are going to go to breakout room discussion.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. We are back. My apologies. The recording was paused, so we missed recording the governance on 101. My apologies, Laban. We'll be now.
Does that mean I have to repeat everything? No.
Yes.
Thank you, Laban. We'll be now, as Ata has mentioned, to echo what she said, we'll be now starting with the community-based programming.
Thank you so much. We had the privilege of having Habiba do the note-taking, and she has very kindly agreed to do a quick debrief.
Yeah.
And thank you, Habiba.
Yeah, of course, happy to. So the first question is, what experiences do you have in developing and designing community-based programs? Lots of folks shared their experiences, including the participation in all levels of the project, from planning to implementation and evaluation from community members. It's good when they participate at every stage of the project. And this person was, I think, working with seniors. It can be a long process to organize and work with people. People are looking for paid opportunities, and the turnover rate with training new volunteers can be a constant challenge. And something that can be, disappointed about community-based planning is when you spend, the first weeks having the attention and enthusiasm of your community, and cannot maintain that level of enthusiasm throughout the duration of your programming. The energy and resources to sustain momentum takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. And, a lot of this work is done by volunteers, and volunteers have lives and responsibilities. And so there is like a greater need for support. And so if you scroll to number 2, what challenges have you encountered, and any success stories folks can share? And these are really just summaries of the discussion. There can be like many hurdles to community engagement, from renting to space and collaborating with volunteers. As mentioned earlier, it's, with respect to time and the turnover rate, it can be difficult. The financial burden is also overwhelming, whether it's the participant who needs to cover aspects of the of their part of the program or the cost to the organization. Someone had mentioned an experience with respect to organizing evacuation efforts for refugees and supporting them when they're here, meeting them at the airport, accessing services. And it's been a difficult experience for, I think, a few folks on the call, when you can't access like shelters or basic needs. And, you know, even with community support, having like the fundraising capabilities, having volunteers to feed people, experiences where people are stretched thin and still like barely breaking bread is very, very difficult. Like the need is great, the community support is there, but there is like very much a need for greater supports because it's not enough, right? So we don't have enough government support, enough support on the ground. And that's been very overwhelming. And so the third question, and if anyone wants to add or interrupt me, please feel free. This is like, yeah, so the third question, what kind of support do you think a network can offer to help your organizations and others in community-based programming? So yes, there we go. It would be good to see us shift into social acquisition. It's difficult, you know, not to own very few assets, and need that to change to grow. You know, like you can have success, but there is no capacity for further building without long-term investment, and there just isn't the infrastructure to support the growth the government expects from smaller organizations and grassroots organizations. And the third point was actually in response to the, I think, volunteer and like the volunteer and support conversation. It can help to partner with larger, more established and like-minded organizations for support if that's what you're looking for. And I'm actually going to skip over a few, I'm going to come back to a few more of those points, but I feel like that links to a conversation where someone asked if there's an Ask Give platform. It would be helpful to know what everybody has to offer and what everybody needs, right? That way organizations can cross-collaborate and motivate communication. Just being able to see that in a database or a marketplace could lead to exchange, knowing what people's needs are and what is available between organizations. 211 is a very, very large database, and there would need to be like refined filters, just in terms of like what's available for space, what's available for coordinating volunteers, what's available for support with funding, or you know, like that kind of thing. It would just need to be a little bit more refined from what I'm understanding. There is definitely a need and a desire for a network. Folks felt like if we had a network, there would be better information systems to help people get from point A to point B and find the support they need, and developing those strong community relationships to increase governance and fundraising capacity can be very, very helpful. Yeah, you know, like someone mentioned that we are all affected in the same way, even when we belong to different communities, and having a network to act as a collective voice is important. And you know, a community-based programming approach to programming is specific and important and valued, but specific training regarding to community-based programming is absolutely necessary. and very helpful.
Thank you so much, Habiba. You did a great job. And again, thank you all of all the participants who are in that breakout space. We hope that we've captured your inputs and done justice to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Habiba, Zubeda, and all the participants in that group. Yeah, we heard, community programming is the best, but when you have communities that have several, that are struggling, to choose even one program is difficult, and on top of that, there is no support. It is very challenging, and you had a very good discussion. So now we go to HR and volunteer management. Ingrid.
Thank you. I'm going to share, and the members of my breakout rooms, please feel free to jump in. But what I did is I had the members, and I'm not sure who's managing the site, but if you can go down to question 2. Really what we focused on was the challenges that so we talked about what collaboration and what shared initiatives could happen, and it was very clear when people shared their successes and their struggles that there's a lot of synergy amongst the communities and groups, and collaborating and sharing is really, really needed and required, especially around templates for volunteers in particular. And I want to stress that a lot of our conversation was around volunteers and the challenges of recruiting and retaining volunteers, not just volunteer members, but volunteer board members, especially coming out of COVID, attracting them back to help the organizations. So having the templates to keep the recruiting process, which one person said was a hamster wheel, because you keep recruiting and 6 months later you have to start the process over again because it's short term. So having the policies and processes in place and templates to use, some of which OCASI already has, is perfect. But they need to start from an adaptive base and a culturally aware base, because one participant talked about having assistance from an HR business partner who was not from the community, and therefore helping hire volunteers and employees from the community was challenging. So, I talked about previously, what I mean by adaptive policies is that you have base policies that you can adapt for your specific community needs. So for example, if you are an organization that is focused on women, an organization focused on disability, you can adapt and build inclusivity in that. So connecting with other organizations that are synergistically aligned is appropriate. And sharing screening organizations. So if you're looking for Black people with disabilities or otherwise, and I just saw Lisa Armazon enter the space. So ASHE is one of the organizations that focus on helping young Black youth with disabilities. So knowing who the other organizations are that can help you. And if you're looking for people with specific skills and abilities, then those organizations should help you vet as you go through and get volunteers who can attract other volunteers, right? So they're going to bring a friend. And remember, volunteers need to be valued. You need to treat them the same way as an employee. And remember, volunteer experience is still experience. So focus on those values. We can move the screen down, please. Focus on those values and what a volunteer can get out of the process. Right? So their learning experience, they're building on their leadership, etc. Now, recruiting and retention was the main challenge that we heard through all our breakout rooms. How do you recruit and retain volunteers on boards, right? So, and balancing those robust HR demands of the organization, whether it's a host organization or your organization, and hiring on short term, that consistent turnover. So take the best practices and templates that are out there and gear them to your needs. So a recruiting process for you could be a 15-minute screening call, followed by a 30-minute intake session, asking very targeted questions about the work that your organization does to vet if the volunteer or the employee is the right person for you. And then if you interview 10 or 20 people that have the skills, but you only have to have the funds to hire one, or you can only hire, get 2 volunteers, start building your database so that you can go back to that database and then keep the volunteers connected with one-off assignments. We're all suffering from fatigue. So reach out to the volunteer and say, you know, I didn't I was not able to bring you in for this project, but as events, et cetera, come up, can you come in and do 1 term, 1 hour, 2 hour volunteer sessions? Because that still builds experience and it keeps that connectivity. Can we go to the next screen, please? And again, they can put that on their resume to build skills. Challenging finding HR business partners from our community. Tanya Sinclair was on. She's come off the screen. But Black human resources professionals of Canada, we are all volunteer members as HR people. We volunteer our time. Reach out to Tanya and that group about HR sessions. She does free HR sessions on a quarterly and monthly basis as well. And then not enough hands, who manages the volunteers and staff, and that deterioration. So it's really, really specific that you need to let communities know that you exist. So you need to be visible. Your organization needs to be visible. What you do in your organization needs to be visible. And you need to make sure that you continue that engagement and that what I call strategic networking, so that you are building that base. One of the participants shared Bloomerang, which is a volunteer management software. Hector, I think you said it was $1,400 US a year. And it allows you to build a volunteer database and go in and update, etc. Volunteer high turnover with board members also came up for capacity building. Make sure that when you are bringing in volunteers, whether they're on the employee side or on the board side, that you're very specific about the role, the time, and the commitment needed. For board members volunteer, please request that they give you 2 years of time commitment. 1 year or less is not going to be helpful. And tell them how much time they need, and build your, my mother always say you have to go slow to move fast, right? So you need to build your structure. What are your roles that you're getting volunteers and volunteer board members for? Can we go to the next screen, please? Okay, perfect. Okay, I think time's up, but it's really building out your structure and making it adaptable to move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I was in that breakout room. The discussion was really good. So I think there are challenges identified. When we talk about volunteers, we're talking about the board. They are volunteers too. So it is not only volunteers to do some of the activities, but also to be the leaders of that small and racialized organization. That is a challenge and commitment. So now we go to the next one, Roger Rampison. I was also in that breakout room. Roger?
Thank you, everyone. And of course, they saved the best for last. So with that in mind, I just had to throw that in. Ingrid, come on, I'm from Trinidad. Can I just ask for the notes to be shared? I don't see it. So one of the things that came out from question 1 from our 2 breakout session is really the insufficient funding that the sector needs. And that has been the current theme across the organization. So that lack of funding translates into many different areas. We don't have the resources to have proper separation of duties. And again, because of the mismatch between funding and the people that we need to support our programs, it creates a whole host of other issues. So again, really, if you had to wrap up the biggest financial management challenge, we feel that the current structure of funding model or the funding eligibility criteria is inadvertently negatively impacting small and Black-led agencies simply because we don't have the history, we don't have the financial statements, we don't have the history of programs or outcomes and so on to sometimes meet these eligible criteria. And because we don't, we often don't qualify for funding. So again, it's a domino ripple effect. So I think the consensus from the two groups is that we just don't have enough funding. Secondly, I think we walked away feeling that the systems, the structure has to be changed. And we're going to talk a little bit about it in the panel discussion after lunch. But if I could go to question number 2. And by all means, Sudeep, anybody else, Sylvan, if you want to jump in, by all means, just jump in. So the second question is, what else do you feel that you could benefit from a collaborative network of small Black-led and racialized organization? And the overwhelming response from this survey, as we saw earlier on, was absolutely yes. We do feel that by having that network, we can get in-kind support. Because we can share the information, right? We can say, okay, here's what this agency has free support. We can lend it to this agency, and we can have a place where we can really create that synergy through that collaborative space, which we wouldn't have if that space didn't exist. One of the things we talked about at length is really there's power in numbers. When one agency go to the funder, there may not likely be a positive impact, but there's more numbers when we get here together in a group. We speak louder, the impact is stronger, we're able to advocate bigger. And I think we can really benefit from that through a collaborative space. So again, the challenge here is how do we come together, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but we do feel that the collaborative space will allow our voices to be heard, it will amplify our voices, and really allow the funders to listen to the nuances of our small communities. We also do feel that by having a collaborative space, we can better build partnerships and relationships. As we talked about earlier on, some agencies might have been in existence for a while and they may move up the eligibility rank, whereas another agency might just be small. And we heard from a group of pharmacists who's struggling because of some of that criteria. But of course, through a network, you can build relationships. It will allow you to do trusteeship dollars, or you can get together as partner agencies and really build that trust. Etta spoke about the whole trust piece and the relationship building at length. And we do feel that by coming together as a group, we can build that first piece, so we can get over that first obstacle, which is that building trust through relationships. So we do feel that there is significant advantage and benefit from a collaborative network. We can share expertise, we can share human resources, we can share our subject matter experts. We can build partnerships, and we could definitely build relationships and create some of those trust barriers. But most importantly, we can advocate louder and bigger. Can we go to question number 3? So what else? So we talked about some of the challenges. What else can we do? And one of the things we talked about is that collaborative space, either through a virtual network or an online portal or a platform, where we can share information, where we could have things that doesn't really have a privacy piece. So we talked about having a place where we can share a financial resource, HR resources, we could bounce ideas off someone. And again, the nuances of that will have to be fleshed out if the sector wants that. We also talked about advocating for tiered criteria of funding. Right now, we have the funders generally have a robust process where they ask for 3 years or 4 years financial statements, your charitable status, and a whole lot of different things. We feel that we can tear that down based on the agency, because we do feel that an agency who has only been in existence for 1, 2, 3 years, of course, will not have those. But it doesn't mean that their outcomes, the work that they're doing, is any less different from an agency who has been around for 10, 15, 20 years. We do feel that the sector has to sort of decolonize that grant writing process, and also push back on some of the structure that exists right now. We talked about using the OrgWise model for sharing some of those resources, but again, some of those will have to be fleshed out. Overall, though, we do see that there is opportunity for space, there's opportunity for growth, and much more than funding. We do recognize that agencies can't, let's say, write a check and give it to another agency, but we do feel that there is space and there's place to do more. But again, we have to want to do more. We have to have the place where we can share those resources. There is an opportunity to do that. And I think the takeaway again is that we have to advocate for changes. I'll wrap up by just mentioning the last point that I talked about, is that we often use the term affirmative action when it comes to decision making on the people-centric fund in this sector. That also relates to policy as well, in my opinion, right? We have to be deliberate about policy decisions, and if we feel that the current structure is inadvertently leaving out or neglecting this sector of the population, which is why we're here, we have to advocate for affirmative changes so that we're not left out. So overall, we did have a really, really good conversation. Key takeaways: lack of funding, a significant mismatch in the people that we need to help, the people that depend on the resources that we have, and the funding that's coming into those resources. We do feel the funders should spend some time really getting to know who we are, understanding the nuances of our agencies and the sector and the people that we serve. There's opportunity for collaborative space, portals, online sharing platforms, and so on. So with that in mind, I do hear the buzzer. Thank you all for participating, and I'm going to turn it back to Adele.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. That was good. You have also summarized, have provided the takeaway. So I would just, thank you for everyone for participating in this breakaway room. And I don't think anyone has been bored because it is a packed forum, and we have been really moving from one section to another, and still, I know we want more, but we have to move forward. And now the next session is the panel discussion. We have panel speakers. The panel moderator is Liban. Liban, I think you have seen him, heard him. I just want to say small introduce Liban, who he is, where he works. So he is the first executive director of Taibu Community Health Center. Liban Gabra Mikael has led the organization for the past 16 years. Today, Taibu has strong community roots and has become a recognized agency that is committed to addressing the impact of anti-Black racism on the health and well-being of Black communities. I can talk a lot about Liban, but I think I just want to leave time for the panel discussion. Liban has over 30 years of experience in primary healthcare, social services, mental health, and community capacity building and development. So, Liban.
Thank you, Etta. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very, very humbled by the great conversation that has taken place so far. And, the icing of the cake is more conversation focused on the topics that we have covered. And we have great panelists here with us who have been part of this process, and you've all connected with them. But now it's time for them to also give us some very high level kind of perspective from their experience and knowledge around how to continue to build this this network. There's going to be like an exercise we all have to do, because time is a crunch thing that we're going to be working. So I know Adel is going to help me to kind of keep this going. But maybe I think it would be good to start with introduction of the panel. And in preparing for this, we thought that it would be better for the panelists to introduce themselves rather than me introducing them or reading bio. So I'm going to give the panelists 2 minutes to say a lot about themselves. And I will start with the names that I hear as on my list, with Dr. Sudip Minhans. If you can take 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll move to the next panelist, and then we'll go into the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Liban. I am not going to need 2 minutes. My name is Sudeep Minhas. I'm the Executive Director of Settlement Assistance and Family Support Services. I've been associated with this project since the beginning. I am a part of the advisory committee as well as one of the mentors. I feel that more than mentorship, I learned a lot. And it wasn't just something that we learned, as members of the advisory or the mentors, but even my agency, I just made everybody join the sessions because they were so informative and they came at a right time for us to, learn and relearn as well as get grounded in some of the basics. I have been in the settlement sector for close to 2 decades now. Have been in Toronto for the past 5 years. It's been a great experience working with the settlement sector. Also, my association with OCASI as a board member long time ago, but now more as a friend to OCASI and OCASI members. That's it about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudeep. And I think you've saved 30 seconds, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds when you're going to give answer later on. So that's a good way of starting. I'm going to move to Hector Addison. If you could take 2 minutes to introduce yourself and set the context for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Levan. I'm Hector Addison. I'm Chief Servant Officer of African Canadian Association of ODWA, Chief Servant Officer, otherwise known as Executive Director. Been associated with the organization since its founding in 2015. African Canadian Association of ODWA serves as an umbrella organization of all African descent associations in the city of Ottawa. In Gatineau, we serve about 75,000 people, Black people in the city. So we are a very big organization, but in terms of our funding, we are a small organization. But in terms of numbers, we are all over the place. And so our mission as many other organizations is to just empower our community to be able to enjoy the prospects this country have to offer and to advocate for the rights of our citizens, our members, especially when it comes to issues of immigration, issues of racism, and issues of systemic issues in terms of justice systems and others. So that's the organization I work for, and we have a vibrant volunteer board. I've been a beneficiary of OCASI's programs, especially the mentorship one. I see my mentor, Sinfa from Seesaw online too. So I really thank him for all the resources that he has shared with us and me in particular. So thank you so much. Looking forward to contributing more during the panel discussions.
Thank you very much, Hector. And I really like your title, Chief Servant. So thank you for serving the community. I'm going to move to Sarah Mahmoud. Please, sorry.
Sorry, if I may just please, I ask from the panel's speakers to speak at a lower
slow
pace, just for the
the
interpreters.
translates.
Thank you, and apologies for interrupting.
No problem. Sarah, please introduce yourself. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Mahmoud. I am the current Women Affairs Secretary at the Sudanese Community Association of Ontario. I am interested in social work and community support, which started years ago with volunteering with the Institute for Canadian Citizenship to support Syrian refugees and 5 Safe Life to support single parents, as well as with the Sudanese community to support newcomers refugees. In addition, I am an architectural designer interested in BIM and development of housing and materialistic methodology. I enjoy being with OCASI as for the sessions and as a mentee, mentored. So thank you so much, OCASI, and for all the skills that we have learned throughout the sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. And this was not planned, Roger. So again, it
Saving.
saved the best for last, I think. If you could give us 2 minutes just to say a little bit more about your work, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Leben. So Roger, I'm Kisoon. I have been associated with this sector actually since the first day I stepped foot in Canada. I started my employment with OCASI, and I have been associated directly and indirectly with the association since then. I'm a financial and HR specialist by profession, but I do serve as the board chair for SAFs. And Surit, my co-panelist, is the ED of SAFs, and I also serve as the board chair for Community Development Council Durham in Ajax. And so again, very heavily involved and committed to the work that we do. And I have been involved in this project for a while. I did lead the financial training aspect of it over the winter time. So again, very committed to getting this work done and supporting the agencies that depend on why we're here. So with that in mind, Liban, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Roger, for your service as well, and all of the panelists who continue to contribute to the work of settlement, refugees, newcomers, and immigrants. We do appreciate the work that you do out there. So we have a few questions that we're going to pose. As I said, time is going to be of essence. I know we've saved a few times here and there, so I think we should be okay. Each question will give you 3 minutes to answer those questions, and the timing will be helpful to kind of gauge your thoughts. And we'll ask one question to each panelist, one question, and then each panelist will respond to those questions. And maybe we can just mix up the order of people who are answering, so some people get the chance to be the best saved for last. So I'm going to do that as well and make sure that we all get that opportunity. So the first question is, how can funders, policymakers, and other stakeholders, could be medium and large organizations serving immigrants and refugees, how can the funders, policymakers, and stakeholders better support the needs of priorities of Black and racialized communities and small organizations in Ontario? And if I may repeat this in French, comment les bailleurs de fonds, les concepteurs, les politiques et les autres parties prenantes peuvent-ils soutenir les besoins et les priorités des communautés et de petites organisations noires et racialisées en Ontario? So how can these policymakers, decision makers, stakeholders help the priorities of Black and racialized communities? So I will start with Roger this time.
I didn't expect that. So anyway, so moving on. So we did talk a little bit about that in the breakout room. And I do feel strongly that because our communities and our neighborhoods are different, I think those differences should be entrenched in policies. Right now, we have one set of rules from a funding perspective that gets applied across the board for all agencies. And I think that's inadvertently negatively impacting small and Black-led racialized organizations. So I think we need to come up with a model, the funders need to come up with a model that really takes affirmative actions on those small Black-led agencies or agencies that serves communities that inherently would have been previously disadvantaged. So I think that's important. I do think that the funders need to take a step back and also understand the nuances or the differences between our communities as well. And I think that will help inform some of those policy decisions that they make in terms of rolling out funding. So I think we have to spend some time advocating for those changes. And I think that will help drive or change the model of how our agencies are funded. Because right now, as we heard from the sessions before, small agencies, new agencies generally don't have exposure to that part of funding that the bigger agencies have, which of course is entrenched in policies. And we have to advocate for changes from where it starts, and it starts from the policies, because of a case manager may say, well, you know what, the policy says, the policy says, the policy says. Let's change the source document. Let's change that policy so that there's flexibility in that policy for an agency. For example, instead of requiring 3 years financial statements, why don't need 2? Instead of requiring a registered charitable status? Why don't we replace it with a trusteeship agreement or those kinds of things, right? So I think we have to advocate for some flexibility, and those changes need to be enshrined in policy, even if that's what the case managers are relying on. So again, flexibility is built into that policy, and I'm really watching my time. And the last piece that I would really say is prioritize key demographics. No two communities are the same. No two demographics are the same. And I think once we prioritize where people come from and the challenges they come with, I think we will be able to get somewhere that will inform policy decisions, which will in turn translate to better outcomes from a financial and human resources management point of view. So, Lebena, that's my comments on that piece. So I turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Let me go to Sarah, and if you can add to the conversation, both around policy funders, but also stakeholders. You can share your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. It's the same question. Okay, yeah, with funder policymakers, yeah, and other stakeholders can take several steps to support the needs. So my opinion is offering training, mentorship, and technical assistance to help navigate funding applications. That will be very important in compliance to the requirement. And also strategic planning, anti-racism training to help organizations and identify and address racial inequities within their own structures and practices. This is something like they have to make a highlight on it. And the other thing I think is simplify the applications itself and reporting processes to reduce the administrative burden, which is something very like all the organizations suffer from it. Work with the small Black and racialized communities to advocate policies addressing systematic barriers and promote equity and inclusion. By establishing centralized information hubs to provide guidance on available supports, funding opportunities, and best practices. I think by implementing these strategies, funders, they can contribute to a more equitable and inclusive support system for Black racialized community. I guess I saved time too.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm going to come to Hector. This round, Sudeep is going to be kept the best for last. Go ahead, Hector.
Thank you so much. And to add to what Roger and Sarah have already said, I think, yeah, we need equitable funding models, right? Something that I know the federal government is trying to set aside specific funding geared towards Black organizations such as the SBCCI and others. That is woefully inadequate. It's a good start, but we feel like we need to be able to improve on that, because small organizations, we deliver much. Most of the success that we have here, it's all because of small Black organizations, right? Not the big ones. The big ones are well-funded, but often they are not in touch with the community. And therefore, the way they provide services is completely different. By having a sustainable, equitable funding model will help. Right, and we have to move beyond, and that is what we have. We have to move beyond this one year project that they put across. Right, we need to go into a long-term project that have a lasting impact. Right, it takes time for a project to build. Sometimes they give you 1 year before the funding is already released. We are in the middle of the year, right? And then they're putting pressure on you. We need a report. We need that. We need that. But if you have a sustainable funding that goes beyond just 1, 2, 3 years, that will really help Black small organizations to be able to make a lasting impact. And I also talk about the same funding stream, but I will talk about making funding flexible, right? Flexible that allows small organizations to address emergent issues and then be able to innovate. You know, most fundings are tied to a specific project. That's what the funders want. But is that what the community really need, right? But if you have funding that allow us to be able to to explore and to innovate, that would be very, very, very helpful. So I will stop here and then I will continue later on. I think I've saved a little bit more time.
Right. So Sudeep, with the time you saved in your introduction and the time that people have saved, I think you're good to go. You're good to go.
Thank you, Levin. And thank you, Roger, Hector, and Sarah. I think you've really covered a whole gamut of different suggestions and really powerful suggestions. I believe in number one, of course, we've talked about the funding practices from the funders, and we've seen some steps taken by IRCC and by other funders and foundations as well, because they want to be more inclusive, they want to be more equitable in how they distribute that money. These are great conversations. These are great points. These are, very noble intentions, but I think they need to move a little bit further into disruption, into making those intentions into practices. And what I mean by that is moving away from traditional grant making, the models that the traditional grant making models that largely favor larger and established organizations. The reasons for that, of course, the funders will give you, or the foundations will also give you, is they want to see capacity before, they have invested in capacity. So they want to see a capacity that is already established for report making, for sending them detailed program reports, for sending them detailed financial reports, HR reports, and all different kinds of reports. Grassroots organizations, number one, are doing the work without being trained or without having that capacity for writing the kind of reports that the funders are looking for. So how do they how can this grant making model be disrupted is by implementing participatory grant making processes. And by participatory grant making processes, I mean include the community. So if you want a certain kind of funding for a particular community, make the community members part of the decision makers. They should be able to decide what kind of funding and who gets that funding for what kind of programs. Don't predetermine the programs. Hector already mentioned that. Don't predetermine the projects. Each community, Roger mentioned that, each community needs different projects, needs different services. So, tailor the project according to the community, tailor the decision of who gets that funding based on what the community actually suggests. Number two would be multi-year funding. Am I already out of time?
Yes, but finish your sentence.
All
quickly.
right. I was just on the first part of the funding practices, multi-year funding, capacity building.
Yep.
You actually set me up for failure because I'm supposed to speak slow, and then I was supposed to go. Anyways, the policy reforms that can go in is there have been community consultations, but I feel that those community consultations also need to be translated into actual practices. So we saw IRCC, having those consultations. What was the outcome of those consultations, and how did their funding practices change based on those consultations? And whenever, others want to give me more time later on in the second or the third question, I can come back to this. Thank you.
Is that a hint?
Yes, very strong
Thank
one.
you. Thank you. Thank you. This I know there's a lot to be said, so I do appreciate. Time is always a constraint. So the second question is, what role do you believe grassroots initiatives and community-driven solutions play in addressing systemic issues faced by the Black and racialized communities? So what role do you believe grassroots initiatives and community-driven solutions play in addressing systemic issues faced by Black communities? I'll go to Hector this time to start. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this is really important. I'll talk about established trust, and I'll talk about credibility, as well as community solidarity. And I think by established trust, what do I mean? Grassroots organizations, such as all of us here, we have a long-standing relationship with our community. And that's because we are very close to the community. And so that fosters trust and encourages engagement, right? And so without us, it will be very, very difficult for systemic issues to be addressed. We need to be on the table. We need to be where decisions are made because we are closer to the people, and then people have trust in us. The government and all those decision makers, they are far removed from the people, right? We are seen as having a credible voice, and we also advocate for our members, and everybody knows that. And it makes it easy for us to be able to mobilize community support. I thought back to the time that George Floyd was murdered, right? It took the community to rally together. And when we said, okay, let's go to the Parliament Hill, was very easy because we have already established that trust, we built that community, so we could rally people around to solve the problem. And then we have seen some of the results since then, the government changing some policies, even though we know that they could do more, right? We promote a sense of solidarity and collective action, which essentially is needed for tackling systemic issues. We have systemic issues plaguing the community, whether it's criminal justice reforms that need to be done, or poverty that needs to be removed, affordable housing, and all that. It's the small Black organizations, small community organizations, grassroots organizations such as ours that are always at the forefront fighting for that. So with that said, I will yield.
Thank you. Can I come to you, Sudeep? Maybe you can continue with the same question and add some of the things you wanted to say earlier on.
Thank you. So one of the things is that, again, Hector's already spoken about that. Grassroots initiatives often emerge as direct response to systemic issues. And they are uniquely positioned to identify the root causes of these problems, which may be overlooked by top-down approaches. And we've always seen a lot of top-down approaches. By focusing on the underlying factors, they can develop solutions that tackle the core of the issue rather than just its symptoms. And we've seen a lot of times that we are, we are only focusing on symptoms and sometimes only providing band-aid solutions. Grassroots initiatives also empower community members by providing them the platforms to voice their concerns, share their experiences, and advocate for change. This builds the community power, and the best example for that is Black Lives Matter, I think, was the best way to demonstrate that, how from grassroots it became the collective voice, and that collective voice was then, the others joined that, but really the solutions and the voice was the grassroots voice. Now, grassroots agencies also, they provide community-driven solutions, which are more effective because they are tailored to the specific needs and the context of the community. They are really contextualized within the community. They take into account, very importantly, the cultural nuances, the historical trauma and existing strengths within the community, which again, larger organizations kind of are removed from. So this is where the real solutions come. And they very importantly also fill in service gaps, gaps in services. So in many cases, these initiatives will fill these critical gaps in the service provision that is left by the government and the larger organizations. They provide culturally relevant programs and services that address the unique needs of that particular community, and especially of Black and racialized communities. They also kind of help in building solidarity and alliances. I've seen the grassroots organizations from different communities are actually the ones that would build those bridges and bridges to communication, which is way more effective than, again, the top-down approaches that we've seen. I didn't take any extra time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Can I come to Roger, and if you can continue the conversation, please?
Yeah, so grassroots agencies tell the stories of the people. And there's nothing more powerful than hearing lived experience from the people who actually lived it. And that's where grassroots agency serve a potential impact. And that is what we can do and use to our advantage to drive policy change. Than having to be told what we should do. Instead, we use the information the other way around. We push up the policy change rather than be it forced down on us. And that's the place where grassroots agencies really come in. Nobody could tell my lived Canadian experience more better than I can. Nobody can tell your lived experience better than you can. And we can only hear that through the voice of the grassroots people. I mean, nobody's going to go to a workshop at 500-600 people that Ottawa might put on and want to pay attention to my personal story. That's where grassroots agencies come in. They take the collective stories of the people that depend on the sector that we serve, take that information, translate it into policies that should be in place, and advocate for those changes, which brings me back to the power in numbers collaboration that we talked about earlier on. We also have the subject matter experts within those grassroots agencies. And a lot of times the expertise within said grassroots agencies are discounted because of where we got our education from, because of what we look like, because of the experience that we don't have, or that they perceive that we don't have. And I talk about Canadian experience. And listen, I came from the Caribbean. Accounting is transferable. A debit and a credit in Trinidad is the same as a debit and a credit in Canada. It doesn't matter where you go. And the folks from OCASI would have heard me say that 15 years ago. So what I'm saying is that the expertise is right here. And we have to use that expertise. And grassroots agencies are the platform, is the springboard, is the jumping board to help us get there. And I think that's the place, or that's, to me, Leben, that's my response to this question, because I do feel that we're not tapping into the resources that we have. And I do feel part of that is the barriers within the policies themselves, the barriers within the funding structure itself, the barriers within the institutions, as we call them. And that's where grassroots agencies have to come in to help eliminate those barriers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Roger. And we would have said, we would usually say ashe to what you just said. It's I don't want you to get me started because I have to go to Sarah for her contribution, but great points shared. Thank you, Roger. Sarah, you're the best now.
I'm the last. Okay, no problem. So yeah, so the role of grassroots, the community-driven solutions, in my opinion, are rooted in understanding the cultural nuances and needs of Black racialized communities with potential to drive systematic change by challenging existing power structure and advocating for policies and practices that address systematic inequities at their root. I think this is one of the important things, understanding the cultural nuances. The other thing is grassroots organizations are often more trusted by community members, leading to greater participation in programs and services. Additionally, community-driven solutions empower individuals within the community to take an active role in addressing systematic issues. So the other thing is their smaller scale and closer connection to the community will allow them for experimentation with innovation solutions and can serve as incubators for new ideas. And if successful, can be scaled up by larger organization or integrated into broader policy framework. So by recognizing the unique strengths of grassroots initiative of community-driven solutions, all stakeholder better support and amplifies the impact of this effort in addressing systematic issues faced by Black and racialized communities. Thank you. I think I'm done. I didn't use the whole time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah, for your contribution. So the last question that we have, I'll start by posing the question in French. Comment composer avec les dynamiques de pouvoir, bailleurs de fonds, autres organismes moyens, grands, communautés que vous servez, et comment assurer des partenariats et des collaborations équitables au sein de notre secteur? Or, how do you address or deal with, and we've started this conversation now, with power dynamics? And Sarah just mentioned about power dynamics, and we've been talking about it in the background with funders or other medium and large organizations, and ensure equitable partnership and collaboration within our sector. So the key is the power dynamics and equitable relationship. And if I may start with Hector.
Thank you, thank you. And I think this is a very important question. And small organizations and community initiatives often operate with limited resources, right? Yet they play a critical role in addressing the specific needs of their community. Allocating resources in an equitable and fair manner will strengthen these entities and then also help address the certain issues that the community face. For example, we talked about it already, having a targeted funding stream, right? I know the government is doing now, but they have to be able to do more. We talk about flexible funding models. We also talk about simplifying application processes. That's what we talked about. We talk about multi-year funding commitment, right? Which is something they could do, offering technical assistance in terms of to be able to level the landscape in terms of finding application proposals and all that. And that leads to it they need to be able to provide support, capacity building activities. There has to be a grant specifically geared towards capacity building. There are many organizations that sometimes offer that, but the barriers to access those grants, for me, it's Ontario Trillium, for instance, come to mind, right? You need to have your account audited by a public accountant, and all those bottles next that sort of prevent organizations, small organizations, to be able to access grants, even when they're available, right? To access them, we need to be able to remove barriers and level the playing field. And so small organizations can compete. When we come to the table, we should be able to contribute and be able to our contribution should be valued in equal terms, just as they value contributions from a bigger, well-funded organizations. So that are some of the things they can do, offering training and development programs, peer learning and networking opportunities, just like what OCASI is doing and offering us the opportunity to come together to share resources and collaborate, right? Mentorship and coaching. These are some of the things that we could do. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can come to you, Roger.
So one of the things we talked about in the session that we had earlier on is really finding a way to tier, when I mean tier, to step or break down into steps the eligibility funding for agencies, particularly those agencies. There's really no reason, in my opinion, why an agency who's asking for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 have to meet the same robust criteria of an agency that's like asking for $1 million, $2 million. I mean, there really isn't any added value for having to go through that teeter nail just to get a small amount of dollars to do a community-led project. And as a grassroots agency, I think we need to advocate for tiered eligibility, which will, in my opinion, help break down that power structure. And let's be blunt about it. Money is power. And funders use sometimes money or lack of availability or access to money to reinforce that power dynamics, right? And I think we have to find a way to break that down. So again, I will keep just discussing that a bit. So I think we have to recognize from a funding perspective that a one-size model does not fit all. We have different experiences, we serve different people, we do different programs. So when I talked about affirmative action earlier on, we talk about affirmative action in making decisions when it comes to people. I think we have to take that as well in decision making when it comes to policy decision making, because we recognize right now that policies are inadvertently, maybe it was designed that way, leaving agencies behind. And we've already established that those are the same agencies that serve a critical foundational role in the fabric of who newcomers are, because we tell the stories, we have the experience, we come into Canada with the background, the education, and so on. But we don't have the ability to take that next step, because entrenched in policy decisions is agencies who have been around for a long time, who can check all the boxes. And we are saying that we don't have to check all the boxes to be able to get a few dollars from you. We just have to have, I'm not saying just write me a check either. I'm not saying that, but there has to be a middle ground where the mechanism by which we have access does not dilute the process. And as a trained CPA, I can tell you there are mechanisms by which we do that, but nobody's listening. And when we talk about that collaborative space, that power in numbers, that is what I mean by that. The louder we get, the more people involved. We advocate, we cry, we scream, we shout, we really make the pitch for changes. And it's only when you become loud enough, changes happen. So I think from a grassroots point of view, I'm going to change for advocacy in how funding structures are currently built. So Levan, back to you. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you. Can I come to you, Sarah?
Sure.
Right. How to tackle the power dynamics?
Yeah. Okay. So, see the third question.
Yes.
Okay. To address power dynamic and ensure equitable partnership and collaboration within the sector, we have to consider many strategies. So one of the things is foster open and transparent communication. I think this is very important among all stakeholders, including funders, medium and large organizations, and the communities being served. This will develop transparent and fair processes for resolving conflicts and addressing power imbalances that may arise within the partnership, with a focus on restorative justice and equitable solutions. The other thing we should consider is rotating leadership positions. I think this is also can contribute in collaboration efforts to ensure diverse perspectives and shared power by facilitate opportunities for mutual learning and capacity building between larger organizations, funders, and communities they serve to foster understanding, collaboration, and skill sharing. My other point is to adopt practices that are responsive to the cultural and social context of the communities being served, and ensuring that their cultural and social context are respected and valued. By implementing these strategies, I think organizations can work towards more equitable partnership and collaboration, and addressing power dynamic and fostering inclusive and impactful. I have few steps. I don't know if the time allowed to say for, like, I have some steps for implementations. We can begin with the power dynamic. Okay, I can do it fast. Begin with a power dynamic assessment to identify existing imbalances and area for improvement, create guidelines for equitable partnerships, that outlines experimentation roles and responsibilities. Okay, I'll stop here. I'll not share the last like 5 points, but
Thank you. We also have opportunity if people are going to ask questions, so there may be opportunities to add more. So I'll come
okay,
to
no problem.
Sudeep now. Thank you.
Thank you,
you so
Levan.
much.
I'm going to actually tell a different story. It's a story that will highlight, because this whole power dynamics has to be understood from the perspective of decolonizing. And what do you mean by decolonizing? How do you deconstruct the funding mechanism or the power dynamics in how do you decolonize that? And the example and the story that I'm going to tell you is about India's model of self-governance. So post-independence, Gandhian principle was that the smallest level of self-governance should actually be with the villages. India was largely, is still a largely rural country. So how are those rural populations going to determine how do they govern themselves? So a parallel with smaller organizations. And Gandhi was talking about this aspect, and it was then introduced, and then it was also put into India's constitution, I think around 1990 or 1992. It's called the Panchayat system. It's called the Panchayati Raj. Raj means rule, and Panchayat is a word that comes about 5 people democratically elected within a village, the smallest level. And they had financial independence. They could actually, so the village themselves could decide who, what kind of taxes to implement, what kind of resources to get out of it for the village development. So it was the local village level development from the locally collected taxes. And yes, of course, also asking for the federal government or the state government to give them some funds for that. And then the 1992 constitutional amendment also was actually to introduce within that a certain reservation system, a term that not a lot of Indians like, or especially the high caste Indians like. It was to give representation to women and to give representation within the panchayat, which is a very patriarchal system, to women, as well as to give representation to the scheduled castes. So that is the caste system that India has. So every year that is rotated. So it is not that one village will always be reserved for women or for smaller castes. It will rotate. So, I mean, for the first 4 or 5 years, it's women who have to be in the panchayat. There are some village ruling models which are all women or all people from the lower caste. Why am I talking about this is actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to take 10 more seconds, is to disrupt what I was saying is the funding practices of top down. If the communities could decide the project that they want within their community or the kind of money that they need for that project and how they would get it, that is the truer model of disrupting the power dynamics. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Sudeep. I think it was a very great example of local self-governance that is closer to the community and can also disrupt that power dynamic. So very appreciative of that story. If there is a link where we could learn more, I am personally interested, so that would be helpful. So now is the time to open up the questions for the panel. We have 10 minutes to do that. So if you have any questions, maybe you can ask Sudeep to say, can you finish off your idea? I don't know, but any questions from the group, please, this is the time for you to engage with the panelists. What we've heard so far, it was really extremely beneficial for all of us. Opal, please. And let us make our question very, very succinct so that they have time to respond.
I will, thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you as the executive director
how do people who are already citizens who are already living here, how do we
You're breaking up a bit, Afal.
how do we assist newcomer organizations?
How could we assist? How could we assist a newcomer organization as people who are here as Canadians? Is that the question?
As people who are, yes, as people who are born here.
Okay, as people who are born here, how can we help settlement or refugee organization? Is the question. Who wants to take that up?
Can I go, Parliament?
You sure?
Listen, I have noticed in my experience that when we come to Canada, we get integrated. We generally don't want to give back. And that's a cry from our settlement sector. And I'm saying it very bluntly. Unfortunately, I'm not going to mince my words. But I want to
usually.
No, sorry, wouldn't happen either way, even if you ask me nicely. Listen, but back to being serious now. I think as newcomers, I think we have an added level of responsibility, not just a level of responsibility, but we have an obligation, in my opinion, I could be wrong, to give back because we've walked that pathway. We've walked that road. And I think one of the things we can do is really lend our expertise, lend our experience to these agencies, which can help inform choices and inform decision making and advocate for policy changes. So I think as newcomers, as Canadian citizens who have been here 10, 15, 20 years, we should take a deliberate action, deliberate step to get involved in our community-based agencies. And I can tell you from my lived experience, when I came to Canada, however long ago, I wanted to give back. I didn't have to, but I wanted to because of the road that I took to come here, right? I was a skilled worker. Yes, I took up however long, came to Durham region. I recognized that back in whatever year it was, Oshawa, Bowmanville, Scugog, Whitby, didn't have the dynamics to serve newcomers like myself, but that's where I lived. And I made a deliberate decision to give back so I can advocate for the people who was coming after me. Right. And I think that's important. And when you look at Durham region now compared to 2008, it's chalk and cheese. I'm telling you, it's chalk and cheese. Right. So I think as Canadian citizens, I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to implore, I think as grassroots agencies as well, when we see newcomers getting up the steps, getting a permanent job, settling and so on, encourage them to give back. And I think that's some of the things that we have to do. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you. Jacobet, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Sorry I joined late, but I made sure I didn't miss it. This is a wonderful discussion. Mine are maybe comments more than questions, but maybe I start with a question. What is the next steps after today? Because we have been talking about this for many years. I've not been here for too many years, but the many years I've been here, I've had this, we expressed these issues. We are talking among ourselves. Perhaps it's better to invite these top funders into these meetings. If not, after this, can we gather ourselves and prepare to take a bus, go to the hill, and present these issues? That perhaps that will make more sense, because if we just represent a report, they don't care. My experience with them is that they don't care, no matter how much noise we make, but we shouldn't give up. Now we should move forward and do something more. Thank you very much. Like Sudeep and Hector said a lot of good things that I believe will go a long way in doing this. And I'm ready to go on that bus. My bag is packed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacobet. And I think the network is for that purpose. So we're all listening, and I think that's a good comment to give. Jane, I will give you the next question, and then maybe another one, and then we'll wrap up. I think time is catching up on us. Jane, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi. So my question is about us when we come in as immigrants. You know, a lot of times people who've been here for a while, the parents work very, very hard, very hard. We know that we work very, very hard and do 2 jobs, go back to school and do all that we need to do. Unfortunately, some of our children also work hard, you know, but the experience when they are younger, they do not realize that they are different. And because we take very good care of them and protect them, they do not realize that they're growing up in a country where where they are not definitely, you know, necessarily favored. So what is happening, and this is I'm seeing in my community, what is happening is when our young men grow older, they are isolated. You know, when our women grow old, our young girls grow older, you know, so most of them are making it to college, but then they're isolated. They're finding that the choices that they have for school, for courses, for their degrees, they are thinking like a Caucasian person, not realizing that they're actually Black. So when they get disappointed, when they get disappointed in the universities, when they get disappointed in the work system, they are going into drugs, they are going into suicide. You know, they are taking their lives. We know that.
Yeah.
What
Is
are we
it
doing?
is it what is the question, Jane, if you don't mind?
So what are we doing to support much as some of them our children are born here, they don't even consider themselves newcomers, but how can we continue to support them? If we are successful, how can we make sure that the children who are born here are successful? And you know, what are we doing, and how can we, you know, we have to play this of you're Black and you're also Canadian, but remember that, you know, I don't know how to say it. How do we help these people to be successful because they actually realize they are Black when they didn't think they were Black?
Okay. I don't know if there's anybody who can give a very quick answer because we have time. So I don't know. How can we support young people, children who are being born here?
The next generation.
The next generation. Hector, do you want to give it a go very quickly?
I think it takes resources to be able to do that, and small organizations are far stretched. We are very, very stretched. So sometimes it's very difficult. We recognize the massive need in the community, but unfortunately, there is little we can do, right? Because of resource constraints. And so we just have to be innovative in the things we do. Yes.
But just really quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say in 10 seconds, I think Canadians born here do have access to different resources that newcomers will have access to. So maybe what we can do as agencies is try to redirect them to some of those agencies and resources that already exist to serve Canadians who are not classified as newcomers. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'm looking at time. Deb had her hand up for quite some time. I'm going to give you space, ask your question like for 1 second, and then for somebody to respond. And then we may have to end the Q&A section. Go ahead very quickly, Deb.
My question is sort of a follow-up to the what's next, and there's also one that I wanted to place to Patty. How do we sustain the movement? How do we sustain the change that we're working on when there's a change at the federal leadership that impacts some policy? How do we not go down the snake back to the beginning, but to be able to sustain that? That's basically, you know, because I think it's also the elephant in the room.
Right. So Sudeep, you have your hand up very quickly. If you can do that in 2 minutes.
Not even 2 minutes. I'll take 2 seconds. Debbie mentioned this morning, this is the space of the brave. And the space of the brave means never stop talking about the issues that are important to us. Because what happens is, thinking about the change in, you know, the leadership, the federal government or whatever, or the political color that might come in, actually means that we need to be stronger, means that we need to actually speak up more and not cover just because, you know, you could be scared you'll lose funding.
best thing about grassroots agency is because you don't have a lot of funding from the federal government, you are stronger and braver than a lot of agencies that have that funding. So continue speaking, continue organizing, and continue advocating for yourself.
Thank you. And I think just to wrap up, having a voice, collective voice sometimes would help not to be singled out. So I think this network could be the voice, and that could be one way to do that. So just to wrap up, some of the key things that were mentioned, I'll go through them very, very quickly, is about how can we change the funder-fundee relationship through different ways that were given in terms of the funding model, the non-traditional way of funding, the flexibility and simplicity of funding. And these things are happening right now. For example, if you look at the city of Toronto, they are simplifying, and they have what is called the Black-led or the 3Bs kind of a funding framework that is very simple to access and also simple to report on. So there are precedences that has happened. The self-governance, the empowerment, and the self-determination is going to be key, both as individual organization, but as a network. I think that's going to be very important. The only thing I would say, though, is sometimes, the system can just say, here is money, go solve your problems over there. I think we need to balance that access to resources with accountability, because the problem was not created by community, but by the system. So those two balances, I think, will have to work together. And power dynamics and how to change power dynamics, I think creating urgency and the voice is going to be important. I always mention the example of COVID-19 funding. All levels of government completely changed the way they do stuff and became very flexible overnight because there were urgency. And I think if they could do that during COVID, I think if there's an urgency, continuous urgency that we can produce or present to them, I think is going to be very important. And the voice should also make sure, that was mentioned quite a number of times, is the lived experiences and the expertise that we have in the community, right? I think that is something that we need to leverage. We are closer to the community, we have a trusted relationship, and the community is the expert of the problem and the solution. And so those are the kind of things that came up. And so thank you very much. If you can give some time, I don't know, emojis and clapping or whatever it is for the great panels for sharing their time, their expertise, their knowledge with passion. In most cases, we do really appreciate Roger, Hector, Sudeep, and Sarah. Thank you very much for your knowledge sharing here. And obviously, thank you very much for participants who stayed. We still have quite a large number of people around here. So this is very powerful, important, and engaging. So I thank you very much. And I'll pass it on to Adele.
Thank you.
I'll
take it. Yeah, Adele?
Yes, sorry, Ada, we just want to give 1 minute, if that's okay, for each of the speakers. Just 1 minute to give their last word, and then we'll continue with the closing remarks.
There you go. You got 1 minute each.
Nothing from my side. Thank you very much, everyone. And I've learned a lot from other panelists. Thank you, everyone.
I hope you're not angry with me, Sudeep, because no.
Yeah, it sounds like
we are neighbors. We'll deal it there.
Okay. Roger.
I can go.
Okay, go ahead, Sam.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Adil, for staying on the top of everything all the time. And thank you, OCASI. Thank you, IRCC as all. And thank you for taking the lead with the panel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you all. And my final takeaway point would be, listen, there's power in numbers. I know as an isolated person, we may feel as if the road ahead is tough to break those barriers down, but it really is important for us to get together in our numbers. And that is what forms those relationships. That is what breaks those barriers. One man couldn't push down a wall, but when we all get together, we can push those walls down. So I would encourage folks to get involved in the network, get involved in a grassroots agency, volunteer, give back. The struggle is real, but the fight is not over. Thank you.
I couldn't agree with all of you more. I think it has been an eye-opener, a very important discussions that we have. Thank you, Liban, for facilitating this. And then the work needs to be done. We still have to go back and do the work, all right? But I think every now and then we'll find time like this to be able to share best practices and resources that will help power our community forward. So thank you all, and thank you for the participants for staying and sticking with us all this while. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, it would have been better if it was in person. Over coffee and lunch, we would have discussed a lot. However, thank you all for your active participation and valuable contribution, and panelists for sharing your knowledge today. So at this time, I want to share the poll result. The second question was, what is your recommendation on the potential roles and function of the network? So the response were, connect with other B3 organizations to help offer support, build stronger collaboration, and help fill any gaps through our internal resources as a collective, provide training but have support modules and or videos, showcase funding opportunities, connecting us to donors, sponsors, and funders, community building and supporting and knowledge sharing on organizational initiative, policy advocacy and collaboration, and continue in the same manner. Those were the responses. And one of the things which we talked about, Jacob, it was so, she wants to go to Ottawa, to talk to funders. I think advocacy is good, and we talked about collective voice. And also we need to strategize how best, because when you do something, you want results. So how best should we do this moving forward? I know I was supposed to highlight the key takeaway from the breakout discussion. Identifying the key takeaway was challenging because each point mentioned hold significant importance. But just to mention a few, we heard about the lack of resources and the challenges that small organization accessing those funds, the challenge of recruiting volunteers and staff, and the need to work collaboratively to share on best practices on how to recruit and hire staff, establishing a strong relationship and fostering collaboration are crucial for laying solid foundation for the partnership. I think the network, that will be the foundation for knowing each other. Once you know someone, you start trusting that person, and that will be the basis for collaboration and partnership. And the other thing that we heard was the funding model should be adjusted to ensure fair funding participation. It should be flexible and should be documented as policy rather than practice. So, if we want policy change, we need to do advocacy work. And that means, going to Ottawa, if need be, writing something to our, MPs, MPPs, even in the city, we need to do that. Unless it is policy, nothing is going to change. The other one was ongoing training and not a one-time training. It should be provided to build the capacity of a small Black-led and racialized organization. Last minute, we try our best, but from the beginning, we were saying this is just a one-time capacity building, means it is not a one-time training, but it should be an ongoing training, and there should be an ongoing support. Each organization requires funds to carry out its own program that respond to the community's real problem and funding gaps. that the other organizations do not provide. I have heard this, so they're talking about the grass, no other organization tells the stories of the community better than the grassroots communities. If that is the case, funding practices should align with the organization need and how it plans to implement its project, not just follow the funder's way of carrying out the program. For this to happen, again, we need to organize. I think organizing, coming as a network is important. That is what we need to do. And people were asking, what is the next step? I think the next step is, strengthen the network, establishing the network as a formal or informal organization, but be committed to participate in the network. We have a mailing list that Adel was sharing. It has been a good communication tool for sharing at least some of the information. And also he has been sharing, for example, any funding opportunities, but we can continue doing that. And that based on, we need to discuss, based on that discussion, we will lead and we will transfer the network to be an advocacy body and something that is useful for the members that are part of the network. I think that is what it is. That is what I have. Adel, you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Ada. First of all, I have received a lot of direct messages. We're very happy here at OCASI by the level of engagement that took place with this network forum, and we want to add that one, you will be receiving an email with the recording of this session. It will be on our YouTube channel, as well as you're going to receive the notes of the breakout rooms, all the main points. And we will be continuing, even though the network forum itself is ending today, the network is still ongoing, and through the mailing list, as Etta has mentioned. The questions that we address today will be sent to the mailing list, so we can also continue the conversations there. So please, if you are not part of the member mailing list, send me an email. I already have received a dozen of emails. Thank you. You will be added by the end of today to the mailing list, and let's continue the conversation there. Beyond that, I also wanted to say thank you for our participants and attendees, whether this is your first and one event you have attended as part of this project, or you've attended a few or all of them. Thank you for taking part of this project. And thanks to our breakout discussion speakers, facilitators, moderators, panelists, Patricia Wilson, Leban, Zubaida, Amy, Ingrid, Roger, Dr. Sudeep, Hector, and Sarah. And a big thank you to our interpreters, ASL, LSQ, and our French simultaneous interpreters and caption writers. And finally, please complete the survey that will be launched on your browser when you exit this Zoom. If you have questions and there was no opportunity to address your questions, please provide us your questions to the panelists in the survey. Okay, we want to continue this conversation in the mailing list network. And yeah, thank you, everyone. This is the last event as part of this project. I will also be including a link to subscribe to the OCASI newsletter, so you can be informed of all the events and capacity building that happens every month. And thank you, everyone. Have a lovely Thursday.